Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of the Digital Diaries. My guest today has spent 25 years in Silicon Valley, holds a PhD in psychology and an MBA from Berkeley, and ran the product marketing of SAP through the rise of enterprise software. Now runs the Silicon Valley Executive Academy, where she helps senior leaders and their teams to lead AI transformation. And what interests me here is almost every executive today will tell you they're committed to AI, but very few organizations are actually being transformed by it. My guest spends her working life inside the gap, the space between what leaders say about AI and what they do. Dr. Victoria Mensch, welcome to the Digital Diaries.
Thank you very much, Peter. I'm excited to be here.
So am I. I'm really enthusiastic. So let's jump right in. You work inside the gap between what executives say about AI and what they actually do. Can you describe the gap to me and how wide it is?
Quite typical to have that gap. You are also in the high technology area, so you know how it is. There is a gap between technology being introduced and technology being adopted. And having a champion within the organization and a leader within the organization to have that vision, to have the technology in the organization and actually seeing the results of that. There is always a delay. We can call it gap, we can call it delay, but there is a space in between that needs to happen. And a lot of time we do start with that vision and we talk about that vision, how this world can be and how technology can transform the organization. The rest of the organization really needs to come along. So that's how that space looks like. There is usually a visionary within the organization. Within the AI space, it's even more than that. There are stakeholders that really apply that pressure. They want to see that transformative effect of AI, and the rest of the organization needs to come along. And there are things that there are stages that the company goes through, and we can talk about that and what that playbook is about. But adoption comes down to people. And that's where I think my psychology background helps as well. So that's my observation in 25 years of being in high-tech industry, is that at the end of the day, it does come down to people. People who accept this, people who adopt this vision, people who adopt the technology and are willing to champion it, not only in the highest level of organization, but throughout the whole company.
Yeah, I completely agree with what you're saying. Having sold technology, having been part of delivery, if people aren't fully bought in to it and understand how it's going to help them, they're never going to commit to change. And there is an upfront investment. So in your experience, what does performing, I'll call it, transformation actually look like when you're working with people to get this to happen?
These are complex issues. What does it look like? Well, specifically in relation to AI, what I like to talk about is there is a difference between treating AI as another technology, new and unusual and powerful that is, and looking at AI as an opportunity to transform organization. So a lot of conversations that we're hearing right now is really at that kind of first stage. How can we make something cheaper and faster? How can we really gain that productivity? Where the true power of this technology, and we are yet to actually understand the long-term implications of that, the true power is really in transformation. How can we make the processes better? How we can make our product better? How we can make our job better? How we can make our life better? Not just cheaper and faster, but better.
I think that really is the goal, because the initial thing that everyone kind of sees as a use case with AI is, oh, we'll reduce customer service costs because we'll get an agent to answer a question or two. But that's not enough for AI to justify it, because you want to enrich the customer experience and you want your agents, your human agents, to feel like, okay, that helped me out. Or now when Victoria's come to me with a query, I understand it and I can say, hey, Victoria, yeah, my AI colleague helped you out to here, but now I'm going to step into it. So it's a really, really interesting point. But when a senior leader says the right things about AI in public, but then tends to stall a decision in private. As a psychologist, what's actually happening there?
Well, there could be a variety of reasons. It could be organizational reasons when the culture of the organization doesn't really support the experimentation that comes with those ideas. So one of the things that we like to talk about in the Executive Academy is Silicon Valley Innovation Playbook. So we really help organizations to tap into that Silicon Valley Innovation Playbook. There's something that Silicon Valley companies, technology companies, do better than probably most of the world, and that's coming up with innovative ideas, with innovation, innovative products, and do it predictably, sustainably. So, in one of the pages from that innovation playbook is really experimentation, bias toward action, which means allowing for that experiment to happen, collecting data, and pivoting. That actually comes with the acceptance of risk. So there is definitely a higher risk tolerance within Silicon Valley companies. It's probably not as easy for established, more traditional companies and more traditional industries, but that actually requires for culture to absorb that, to make an allowance for that additional risk, and that kind of works toward the success of those AI projects. It's a very new territory. Sometimes just implementing a chatbot on a website is an easy, low-hanging fruit, right? But when we're starting to talk about those transformational processes and projects, then the risk of failure is high just because of really high uncertainty around this. And that's on the cultural level within the organization. There needs to be an allowance for that acceptance of a possibility of not reaching the desired outcomes, which is really not a failure. So that's kind of the big shift that needs to happen within the organizational culture, that it's not a failure, it's a lesson that we need to learn from. And that you build that into the culture. So how do we actually turn this into a lesson instead of looking for blame on the failure? So a lot of times this is actually something that is very difficult within the organization for executive to overcome if that culture is not there, if that support is not there in the wider organization. On a personal level, there is definitely a lot that we're going through that I call the identity crisis, because what AI is really rapidly replacing intellectual tasks, right? Your analysis and coordination. So all those things that we as executives thought was our core expertise. So the question is, if AI can do it better, what am I, right? So what is my role in this? So more often than not, there is a sabotage that's going on for people who are afraid to be replaced by AI, and understandably so. Quite a lot of fear on all levels of the organization. So what does it actually mean for AI to be so pervasive within the company?
Yeah, like I saw that in my own role recently. Like, we're a tech company and I work in enablement onboarding, and they said, oh, we have this agent that's going to help train salespeople from a coaching perspective. And immediately everyone I could see on the call, like, the shoulders hench up. But all it was one little segment that was really going to enhance the person's onboarding. But I can promise you there is no way a human being is going to be cut back from this one little thing. Now, it might be on the roadmap in the bigger picture, but I think over that time there'll be an evolution as to the expanse of our roles in terms of what we're doing and how we incorporate AI in that way.
Yeah, so exactly what you said. When you look at your role definition within the what you used to do, this is the job you were hired to do. These are the tasks that you have in that job, and you can see how some of those tasks can be chipped away and done better and faster and more productively, maybe with AI. Then there is a natural reaction to ask, so what is left for me to do? And that's a totally valid question. So yes, the organizations need to think through that, but on a personal level, each and every one of us wants probably to look at that as well. So these are the tasks that I currently have. Some of them I enjoy, some of them I don't enjoy, but don't look at this job as one solid thing, right? So we are actually going through this period of what I call unbundling of job roles. So look at those tasks and see, well, this is fantastic. If that can be automated, what can I do with this time that I now have? How can I elevate my job, my position to make it better, to have a bigger contribution, to look at those transformative power of technology, rather than just saying, oh, okay, well, instead of I had to copy, I don't know, that many lines of codes before, and now I don't need to do that, so what am I going to do with lots of things? All right?
Yeah, I saw about a year ago, but there was an article in a UK newspaper, and it said, I want AI to do my dishes and laundry, not my writing. And it was exactly the point. It was like, take all the stuff out of my life that I don't want to be doing, that I don't need to do, and let me focus on the creativity. But you mentioned the bigger issue there as well around with change of just the overall fear. AI is threatening someone at the top, from a senior executive who's genuinely risk adverse. It adds in layers of complexity around data security, data residency. How does that sit on their shoulders versus the companies, and how are they going to actually move this change? Because even shareholders are shouting, we want AI in our business, but to do what? Like, as you say, is it just to go faster? That's not enough, right? It's got to be a more systemic change.
It is true, and it's a real challenge. So what can I tell you? It's a real challenge, right? So, and that's when we start talking about leadership, and that leadership really requires courage. So if you think about this, what is leadership? Leadership is, first of all, self-leadership, and having that courage to stand up to that pressure. So obviously there's some things that you'll have to accommodate. So nobody's questioning that it makes sense for customer service, some of the customer service functions to be replaced by your chatbot, right? So those repetitive automated tasks, that's great. So what can you do on top of that, right? So, and that's kind of that making a case for that transformation, and that does require courage and leadership and standing up for your values. So that's kind of what I'm trying to preach a lot of times, is that we have a choice in which values to adhere. Yes, there's a shareholder pressure and all that, and you have to manage that, but at the end of the day, so what do you want to be? Who do you want to be? How do you want to see your role in this company? How you want to see your role in the society? How you want to see your role in the closed circle, people who report to you, right? So that's kind of that self-leadership element that needs to happen. And these are not empty words. These are real words and real decisions and real choices that we make every day. I think that we have a lot of power on the personal level to actually shape that agenda.
And can you give me an example of what that would look like? So if let's say I am the ambitious and somewhat courageous leader, and I want to make the change, how would you go about it? Because the idea that you just tell someone we're going to overhaul our manufacturing line in one go, I imagine you're going to get some pretty hard pushback, right?
Absolutely. There's no reason to overhaul a manufacturing line in one go. So, but there's a reason to have these conversations and to put this question in front of other people and have that discussion. So can we have this discussion instead of saying, well, that's how many people we can, this how much labor costs we can cut with automation. Say, well, how can we actually improve this, and what can we, if we were to start this process today, given the technology that we currently have, how would this process look like? Instead of just taking the process that existed and evolved for a variety of different reasons to what it is now, what would that look like? And not the conversation that needs to happen. So we started at the beginning of this episode, right? So we started with that talk. So the gap between the words and the actions, that's how you break. So you create those words first, you create that vision, you articulate that vision, and it does not happen on its own individually. It's better when it happens actually across the different functions within the organization, across different levels of the organization. And you ask those questions: how can we transform? Not just how we can improve efficiency, but how can we transform? And then design steps to get there. So like not just, well, tomorrow I'm going to report on my results, right? But I actually need to think in the future. And those are not new concepts as well. So those are the concept, how much of your time you spend. So 70% of your time you spend on improving current processes and current products. And then, 20% of the time you're looking at improving efficiency. And then 10% of the time you're actually looking at the future. So 5, 10, 20, 30 years from now, how is that going to look like and accommodate for those in your everyday life now? So that's how you stand in front of that uncertainty, right? So that uncertainty is only going to increase. I think we all have to live with that and accept it. The only thing that's certain that there is uncertainty. But how do you stay in front of that? How do you actually, in a sense, create that vision? Based on your assumptions and based on those conversations and planning.
I'm even hearing there as you're saying that it's like this goes back to your first point, that it's about people, because you're saying bring all the organization together to co-create the vision. And with, say, like first level employees, I think it's so important to include them in that vision creation, because you might define a process and they'll go, well, in practice that's not going to work, or they mightn't push back, but then you find out in practice they're doing something different. Ever watch an episode of Undercover Boss? The boss goes in and is like, what are they doing? This is not what I want them to do. But then you find out many times there's a very good reason behind it. There's a practicality here. And so it allows you to bring in that exception handling and go, well, in our future vision, we don't want you to do that, but we want your input on where that's going to make the difference. And I think if we're all going forward together, it does bring a greater sense of calm, and then a sense of innovation at that point. Have you seen things like that play out in your experience in Silicon Valley?
Well, absolutely. There's a lot of expertise that resides on each and every level. And a lot of that expertise is really hidden. So that's one of the challenges within, especially large organizations. How do you actually make sure that expertise is maximized and really used for the growth and development of the entire organization? So, and that's, yes, there is a responsibility on the organizational structure and on leaders, but there's also a responsibility on individual people, and that's what we're talking about. So if you think about, given the situation, I can see the world where the organization is really a collection of more or less free agents, right? So people who own their expertise and they lend that expertise into a larger organization. That requires quite a bit of self-responsibility.
Yeah.
Right? And ownership of kind of shaping your role, right? So that kind of unbundling that we discussed plays into that as well. So there's definitely, some examples of maybe not necessarily in the high-tech world, but there's some examples here and there of organizations, structuring this way. But this is kind of on the organizational level, but definitely on the personal level, taking that ownership over your expertise, over your career, and creating a vision for each and every person, where you want to take it and how you want to spend your time. What is it that you enjoy doing? What is it that you're not enjoying doing? So now that you have some free time, let's say some freed up time, from the tools and automation tools, what else can you do? How you can actually up-level your activities.
It's very interesting. You used a key word there, and it was career. Because someone who's in charge of their career will already be thinking this, I think. And there are many people in jobs now. They're also in careers, but what I mean by that is they're maybe in a bit of an autopilot phase. Let's just say they've young kids at home or something like that, where they're just focusing on what they can do, and they may feel they don't have the headspace to do that and reflect on it. But if I were to ask you to predict 10 years from now, are you seeing a world where we've a lot of freelancing, so to speak, and like my expertise is this, and I could work 5 days a week with 5 different companies in that scenario?
I could see that. I think we had these predictions for some time now, gig economy, right? So I don't know if you've heard this term, but we've been hearing this for ever since the start of internet, right? So when these boundaries were really expanded on where you can work and how you can work and how you can monetize your expertise. I think, yes, that is becoming even more real going forward. But what's important, I think, is that ownership part, right? So that realization that, taking ownership for your career, for your expertise of what do you want to build with this, and shaping it this way, whether you choose to be in the full-time position going forward, or in the fractional role going forward, or in some other more flexible engagements. I think there's much more that's opening up going forward.
I think that's really interesting. But one of the things that I could see a little bit there is the potential for burnout. And you have talked a bit about burnout-proof leadership. How is that working in the world of AI? Because, kind of to their points, we're all getting pressure left, right and centre for this. What does that look like in contrast to just hitting your number and growing the business, reducing costs kind of thing?
Yeah, so that's interesting because I feel like there's another, like a crossroad, like a value-based crossroad. So some of the examples I can tell you, some of the conversations that I had with executives recently is that with automation being more available within the organization, when you just apply, AI again to existing processes, there is a real opportunity for amplifying the wrong thing. So now all of a sudden we can produce tons of content, right? And then the expectation now is that a human would be able to produce at the same speed, the same amount of content. And obviously that's a false expectation that definitely leads to burnout. So I've had quite a few discussions recently from real people, real Silicon Valley companies. So now the value statement from here would be this, right? So we cannot expect humans to do these tasks at the same volume and at the same speed, and we shouldn't. So now what is that value that as humans we bring into this position? And we start talking about trust, and we start talking about connection, we start talking about mentorship, and we start talking about judgment, right? So at the end of the day, and we start talking about creativity. So I think that's on the individual level, we all learned as well. So what you put into the tool is what you're going to get out of that tool, right? So that ability to ask the right questions, to have that creative vision of going forward. So that's our value there. To be able to withstand this pressure is to be able to articulate that value. Yes, maybe I cannot produce 100 articles in 5 minutes, but I can come up with really good ideas what they should be about.
Yeah, well, and that is kind of the big difference, though, isn't it? Because it's not going to be creative. It's not going to just say, oh yeah, here's 5 great ideas. And if you think about how ideas are formed, they're not, people always describe them as a light bulb moment or something clicked, but it's actually been a combination of thoughts wandering around in somebody's head that at this precise moment connected. And so it feels like that. And this is where people that, I think, misunderstand the role of AI or exactly what it is. It's a language model based on historical data that makes a prediction or produces output based on information that has happened. So the true innovation nearly has to come from humans in that way.
Exactly. So, and that's kind of, as I said, that's the value statement. And as much as you can shift the conversation on the individual level, on the team level, on the organizational level, in that direction, that's what's going to help to give a much more pleasant work environment on each and every level. Now, we also talk about kind of individually what you can do to withstand that burnout. And that's really kind of coming back to yourself, right? And the totally kind of self-improvement or personal development trajectory. So one of the things that burnout does, it's a chronic stress reaction, right? So to the point where we're really losing motivation. So your nervous system cannot replenish the energy. So you're running on those empty tank, right? So and exhausting all the systems. So the counter to that is like, how can you bring that energy back? So one of the really interesting techniques that I advise everyone to do, and that's what I do for myself, is to really keep that in focus. What is it that you enjoy doing? So not only in the job setting, well, this is the part of the job I enjoy, this is the part of the job I don't enjoy, but in your wider life, we are all multi-passionate human beings, right? So we're not just one-dimensional. My job. We're multi-passionate human beings. What is it that, brings joy into my life? What are those activities that actually make me happy? And they don't need to be big activities. They could be small ones that I really like to step outside and feel the sun on my skin for 5 minutes in the middle of the day, just for the sake of it, because it makes me happy. So you do that and you do that. And that's how you intentionally, right? So that's an intentional activity to replenish your energy this way. So this is not a woo-woo. This is not something, this is a totally, scientifically proven method to intentionally replenish your energy as one of those methods.
And that's a really important piece because, as you say, like burnout, it hurts everyone involved, obviously the person themselves mostly. But do you think that AI is adding pressure or exposing pressure that was already there and now it's more visible?
Yeah, and as I said, it can be both, right? So it really, so at the end of the day, this is a technology. This is the technology, and it's up to us which way we're going to turn. So in a lot of sense, we're at that kind of crossroads. What values will we choose going forward? AI can totally contribute into the problem, as we see in some organizations already, right? So as I described, so if you're start to expect from your people to receive the same output as from a software, that's definitely going to contribute into the burnout, right? But if you look at that value, while the value of human contribution is beyond just pure numbers, so how many lines of codes I wrote, how many pieces of content I wrote, how many products I assembled, right? And the value is different, and the value is in the betterment of our lives, right? So we want to live better lives. And then that's the value statement on its own. And then AI can totally be the contributor in that. So when you remove the unnecessary and very dumbing activities, and you elevate the things that you work on, and the creation of those ideas, and something that's unique for each and every person. We're uniquely gifted, we have unique talents, and we can contribute. We have a pathway to contribute those talents in a variety of different ways, and AI can help with that too. But there is a choice there to be made, and I just want people to be aware that every one of us have this choice. We do have a choice which way we're going to go.
So I think you're kind of answering my next question, but I'll just put it to you anyway, is that, like, on one hand we say AI removes the drudgery, it frees people up, but then we've also just said that there's an element of burnout. Both can't be true exactly, but so are you saying there needs to be a layer above this, or where does this make sense, is what I'm getting at?
Well, I am certainly hoping that we as a society make the choice toward the latter.
I'm with you there, by the way.
Exactly. So each and every person, you ask each and every person individually, so how do you see the future? I'm saying we want that, and we want it that way. No, I'm saying that this is not going to happen on its own. This is an individual choice. This is a collective choice and a societal choice. I don't want to be, too grand about this, but that's the reality of it. We are at the crossroad, and which directions we're going to go is up to us.
I think so, and I think some of the resistance is just it's nearly like a fatigue. If you think about it, it's what it was the end of 22, ChatGPT exploded, and we're only midway through 2026, and we were told all these wonderful promises, and the truth is, be it personal or professionally, we're not necessarily seeing them in the gains. Like, if I can share my experience, I use it for health and fitness tracking. And it's great, but that's a really basic use case in terms of, nobody's going to reinvent their business on something like what I just described there, right?
Yes, exactly. Yes, exactly. So we tend to overestimate the impact of technology in the short term. So all this hype, and a lot of it is hype, given what the state of the technology right now, and what the use cases are available, and how people are applying this and developing toward those use cases. So there's definitely a lot of overpromise right now. And we tend to underestimate the impact of technology going forward. And I think we're in that transition right now to understanding that, while the promises that were made are probably not there yet, We're still,
Mhm.
we're trying, when we're starting to realize kind of a longer term implications of a technology like AI on each and every level of our society, on our personal, well-being, on the close community, on the organizations, and on society in general. So there's a lot to learn and a lot to experience going forward.
I couldn't agree more, and I actively encourage everyone to try and incorporate it into their lives. Not let it take over, but in simple little ways. And someone gave me a great use case they had is they're trying to expand their cooking knowledge, but rather than spend more money, they go to ChatGPT and say, "This is what I have in my fridge. This is what I have in my presses.
Yeah.
What can I make from that?" Now, it's pretty lighthearted, but by incorporating it, they're gradually learning different ways it can be used, and they'll instinctively kind of bring it in a little bit more and more. Then they'll go, actually, in my job this would be really helpful and I might alleviate stress. And then, kind of to our earlier point of getting people bought in, we're gradually kind of addressing that issue ourselves.
Yes, and understanding the limitation of the technology. So in this particular example, this is great, right? So there is some kind of a synthesis of information that happened on the AI level. So look at the ingredients and brought up those ideas. Now, where is the human element in that, right? So we don't want to completely outsource our judgment in there. Then it's for you to decide this is something that makes sense or doesn't make sense, this I like, what I don't like. So that contextual information, that's kind of the human element, your personal unique element that you want to bring on. And that's exactly, when we do, all other use cases, that's exactly that. You actually want to envision it first without the support of those tools. Or maybe use that for, giving you some options of what you already saw and envisioned and kind of thought through a little bit. You don't want to completely outsource the thinking. I think that's kind of the danger of that. But that's how you realize, like, oh, okay, so that's a complementary skill set that we have, right?
Yeah.
So now I'm not worried that I will be a third wheel in this equation.
No, you'll be part of it.
I am at the steering wheel, right?
I will be the orchestrating agent, if you don't mind. So I'll give you kind of a final question for today, Victoria. For a leader listening right now who feels behind on AI and is quietly running on empty, what's the one thing you would say to them right now?
I'd say, look, this is the reality. AI is not going away. And we all have a responsibility, a self-responsibility to figure out how to make this technology the most beneficial for us on so many different levels. And we have all the tools to do that. So that kind of taking that responsibility for figuring out what's useful, what's beneficial, and how does this amplify my value and my uniqueness in this process. So that's what I would encourage every leader to do.
That. And I think that's a really, really great way. And I suppose just to follow on, 18 months from now, what do you think will separate the leaders who genuinely transformed from the ones who only performed it?
Yes, so embracing of change, so that curiosity that goes beyond fear. Yes, you can be fearful, it's totally normal, human reaction to fear of something. But to go beyond that, a curiosity, what's behind that? Well, this is the new technology that came along. How exciting, right? So how can I make it? So what is it around the corner? What else can it do? So that curiosity, that's embracement and kind of adaptability, toward that change is what going to separate those who will come ahead.
I absolutely love that, Victoria. Look, I think we will leave it there on what has been an incredibly insightful conversation on leadership, AI, psychology. Kind of the wealth of knowledge from your career in life has really shone through, so thank you so much for that. Anyone who wanted to get in touch with you or learn more about the Silicon Valley Executive Academy, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
If you enjoyed this conversation, listening to this conversation and the topics that we discussed, I encourage you to sign up for our newsletter on svexecutive.academy. That we send this newsletter every week, and that's exactly what we're talking about.
Nice. Well, we will include the link to that in the show notes, and I will just say thank you very much again for being on the Digital Diaries.
Thank you, Peter.